This quick tip came out of one of our workshop discussions where I often talk about my color studies when I go out to do color studies. One thing I think is that people often have the wrong idea about what a color study is. It doesn't mean that you do a painting necessarily, but when you're doing a color study, that's what you're doing. You are studying color, or you're trying to discover what you're really looking at in terms of color. My favorite way for going out and doing plein air painting is not to do a complete painting in plein air, but is to study the color. And my favorite medium for doing that is gouache. So I want to show you just a little bit about the setup I use there and a little bit about the color study itself. Before we do any kind of plein air painting, we need a rig. We need to put together a little kit that is at the bare minimum of what we need, and yet will do the job for us. And this is my little gouache rig. All this stuff falls together in this little box, and the little box goes in I have a backpack. Backpack stays right there in my studio ready all the time, so all I have to do is grab the backpack, go outside, and do whatever I want to do with plein air study. Next thing is take note, or what I like to do is to take note of the weather, what it's doing. So if it's a sunshiny day, I will take just the colors I need for that sunshiny day. If it's an overcast day, I take just the colors I need for the overcast day. That cuts down on the weight of the amount of the number of tube colors I need to take with me. Gouache is my favorite medium for doing plein air studies. Gouache is nothing in the world but an opaque watercolor. It works very much like oil works. We squeeze it out of the tube on the palette. We can use it in thinner washes just like we do watercolor. But it's water soluble, and I love the way it works like oil, because if I've got oil painting in mind, then it's really easy to translate. Okay, so that's that. From that point, what I'm doing is I'm looking for the colors I'm seeing. I'm not looking at trying to paint a scene of what I'm doing, not to begin with, but I'm looking at what are the colors I'm seeing in that painting and what do I need to mix to get it. Now, normally in a winter landscape, like we have in my area, I will just take a primary set of colors with me. I want a warm blue, and my warm blue is the phthalo blue. I don't care what anybody says, that's my warm blue. And a cool blue, which is ultramarine blue. I usually will use just alizarin crimson for the red tones and the cadmium yellow for the yellow tones. And white, of course. With gouache we use white. We don't use white in watercolor. So from those three, I should be able to do a color study, or I should be able to discover whatever colors I'm looking at. So I just want to show you the process for doing that, my process for doing that, and also to emphasize that the purpose of color studies doesn't mean, or the purpose of a color study is not to do a painting of the scene, but the color, in some cases, the color relationship. Now, I'm using this winter scene to show you the process. So you might read that as grays and blues. I'm seeing in those grays some yellow oranges and some red violets. I even see some hint of blue-green. I'm seeing in here very low intensity or low saturation of the yellow oranges. Here low saturations of red violet. In some cases red violets and yellow oranges together. Very high value. and a light value and more in shadow value in here, kind of a middle value area in here. And I'm seeing these blues vary from a warmer yellow blue, greenish blue here, down to almost a blue violet here. So there's a whole range of colors. Now I'm not going to go through all those colors, but I just want to show you my process. I'm thinking when I look at this, I'm not thinking in terms of, I don't call it grass, I don't call it trees, I don't call it water, I don't call it sky. I call it by its color hue name, which is going to be either, as the hues are named around the color wheel. I call it by its value name, and I call it by its saturation. And so that's what I'll be going for. So I will start out then, just to show you what I do, I'll start out just by spotting a color and seeing what I can get in the range of that color. Now I'm just going to use this little filbert brush here. It's kind of a little workhorse brush I use in gouache. By the way, the brushes for gouache, the synthetic brushes work much better in my experience for gouache. Brushes that have a little bit of spring to them. The softer brushes don't do as well when I'm working with gouache without thinning it down. So this is kind of a workhorse study brush I use right here. And so what I want to do now, I'm just spotting area. Let's just go right in this area right here. What am I seeing? Now one way that you can do that is to have a handy little tool. If you don't have one of these, you can just get paint a 3x5 card with a neutral gray and punch a hole in the center of it. But this is a little isolator. I can look through here. If the colors are so all blending together that I really have trouble reading what I'm reading what's there, I can isolate it. I can hold it right like this, close one eye, hold it right like this, and center this over a particular color. I can see the value, because this is a neutral, this is a middle value. And so if it kind of blends with that, I know I'm in the middle value range. If it's lighter than this value, I know it's a lighter range. And if it's darker, I know it's a darker range. So I can read the value through here. And then I can also read a color in isolation. Now I'm looking right up in here in this color. And I want to aim it. Where do I need to be? What range of color do I need to be? And how would I read that? Okay, so I read it already. It's a middle value, so I know it's middle value. And it seems to me that it's reading in that red, violet to orange range as far as the hues go. So you might think, well, that was an odd way to read it. Well, let me show you what I'm talking about. First of all, what I'll do is to pull some white out here. And then I said red, violet. And by the way, this is my little water container. So you don't need a very large water container for doing these studies. I always have paper towel with me too as part of the kit. Alright, so I have the brush just a little bit wet there. Now, I'm aiming for it right here first. I said, I heard myself say red, violet. That means I need to mix red, violet first. And so then I need to decide which one of those blues. I could use either one of those blues. I'm going to go for this phthalo blue here. And pull out a little bit of the phthalo blue right here. And the brush is a little bit wet there. And we'll pull out a little bit of alizarin crimson into it, because I know that red and blue make violet. And I'll pull enough alizarin crimson into it till I can begin to see it turn red violet. There is the hue. Now, I also know that this leaning towards, phthalo blue leaning towards yellow is going to give it a little bit of a neutralizing quality, because alizarin crimson leans a little bit towards violet. And so that's another reason for making that. I could make that same color with this, but that's the choice. Now, I want to change the value. I've changed the hue. Now I want to change the value. I want to get it middle value. And you see when I pull white into that, how very neutral that looks? Okay, I'm going to pull the white over into this pile right here. And I want that to be in that middle value range. Red, violet, middle value. All right, now one way, but another thing that we have to be aware of when we're working with gouache is that it dries darker than it is when it's wet. Alright, so now I can do that. I can hold my brush up right like this and close one eye, and I can read then how close I am. If I close one eye, hold my brush, you see I'm a little bit light, so I need to pull a little bit more, a little bit of the darker version into it. And so I will do that for the red violet. And get it just a little bit darker, just add a little bit of time. So value is the lightness and darkness of the color, the hue, the color. The hue is what colors go into it. And so this is what I'm looking for, the middle value red violet. Now let's see. Alright, now that I hold that up, I'm seeing pretty much in the value range because this sort of disappears. But what I can also see is that this is not quite neutral enough. Now what I know about violet is I can add a little bit of yellow into it. Red violet, it's the same thing. Red violet, well, if I'm crossing a color wheel, it would be more, the red violet would be more like yellow green. But I've got blue here and there and the yellow, and those two also make green. So also I'm just going to reach for the yellow and pull a little bit of yellow into that, not much, control it. Now I'm reducing the saturation. So now I've considered hue, value, and saturation. I hold my brush up, that needs to be a little bit redder. See, you can do that. Now I'm going to begin to add that to the, let's just mix now that I've got that, now that I've got that figured out, I can keep mixing that proportion of those colors, and I'll come up with the same thing every time. If I need it lighter, add a little white. If I need it darker, I add a little bit of blue. So now I will go, I need to dampen the paper and make it go on the paper a lot easier. Gouache likes to have, Gouache likes to have a little bit of dampness to be able to adhere to the paper. Adhere. Now I'll put that down. You see that looks very dark. And if I compare this to that, it's reading relatively, it's reading pretty close to the right value. Now, what I can do to check that, I can see it looks dark against the white, against the light, but what I can do to check that is to rinse off the brush, or I could get another brush and just put a very dark beside it as a part of the color study, just to tell me how it really is reading in value. So now I can go and mix a really dark, and let's just place that dark beside. There you go. Now you see, now when I compare those two, that looks more in the right value range. So that is, now I have done that study of that particular color. That particular color was reading that particular value. Really, I'm not trying to find, I'm not trying to do the color, not trying to do the painting of that. But what I can do now, as I look throughout that thing, I can see that I can use that same mixture with variations of it everywhere I see that middle value color. Because if you look at this as a neutral landscape, and you can see it gets a little lighter and a little bit more yellow as it comes to the front. So if I see that happening, I can just add a little bit more of the white to it. Now listen to what you say to yourself. I said that feels a little more yellow and a little lighter. If it needs a little more yellow, I add yellow. That's the hue. Needs a little bit more lighter, I add the white. That's the hue. And then I do the same thing. And remember, this is a color study. So then I can compare this. Now, okay, that looks a little bit on the green side, so it doesn't have quite enough red in it. And let's add a little bit more yellow. A little bit more red, and there we go. You see that's pretty close. So that one I would place right here and say, okay, that looks pretty close to the color I'm looking at. And then if I blend backwards into that, see, I can put up, kind of overdid that part. That's the neat thing about the color study, though, is that you're in control. You're in control of the value, you're in control of the color, and you can make that value change and that color change according to your observation. You see here it goes cooler, so as it goes cooler in the background here, I see it goes cooler, it also goes lighter. So if it goes cooler, it means it goes bluer. If it goes bluer and lighter, I add the white to it, the blue to cool, the red or the yellow to warm, if I need it that way, if it needs to go that way, white to lighten, and then I can keep going, you see, like that. So, you see, I'm not trying to aim it in that place, but I look here to get this. Now that came out on the paper as looking a little bit greener. Well, see, that's the neat thing about doing color studies. That means that I didn't quite get that proportion of red in there. And so then I add the proportion of the red, and that begins to then look more like what I'm seeing right there. So that's the way I do the color study. I will then allow my eyes to look up, to look down, come up with the basic color combination that I need to paint that scheme. And then if I have time while I'm on location, well, if I have time while I'm there, I might want to do just a quick little painting of the whole scene once I get the actual colors figured out. Or I might just take a photograph of it, because now once I have the colors and the values analyzed, I have them recorded here in a record that might mean nothing to somebody else, but it certainly does give me the information I need. Then I have the information I need. I can go, if I want to do a large painting in oil, I've got my color notes here. I've got the photograph I have there. I know what I need in order to go right in and do a painting, and I don't have to figure that out again. So that's pretty much the process. I will do one more little thing here just to sort of show you kind of how this will work, and that is I see up in here, I'm seeing that kind of bluish sky. Now I asked myself, what color is that? And I would call that a blue leaning towards green, or a greenish blue. And then I know that phthalo blue is that blue will lean towards green. It's a very light color. So I can then, I'll come over to the other side, come over right here. I can come over here now and pick up a little bit of that, not much of that phthalo blue, pick up just a little bit, because phthalo blue is very rich. That may be, that may be exactly what I'm looking at. I hold my brush up here and say, it's a little bit on the green side. So then when I can have the choice there, I can add a little bit of ultramarine blue into it and kind of knock that down just a little bit, and then hold my brush up and say, well, when I hold it up to the light, that particular light source, it kind of changes, and that too can tell you. Okay, I put that down up there, and I say, aha. When I look at this, I look at that, that's very, very close to that blue I'm looking at. If I see it's going lighter, I ask myself, does it change in hue when it goes lighter? Does it change in any way in hue? And if it doesn't, I just add the white. If it does change in hue, I ask myself, what hue does it change to? And so there we go. So you can see now I begin to see the relationship. I begin to say, okay, what I'm looking at there is much lighter than what I'm seeing here, but then this, I remember, is this down here. So I can even change that now by moving in with that same brush load, moving back into my gray, and we have it pretty close right there. A little bit more, a little bit darker, a little bit darker. But once I have that gray mixture there, there we go right there. That's pretty close to what we're seeing right up there. So that shows you a method of thinking. It looks like a splotch here. It looks meaningless here. And also keeping in mind that gouache does dry darker. But we learn to adjust those things as we go. So it's a lot of fun, and a lot of fun to come. It gives you confidence when you do these studies out in nature like that. It gives you confidence to help you to come up with information. The key is observe here, observe for the value, observe for the hue, and observe for the saturation. and then put those three together. Listen to what you tell yourself. Remember that when you put those three together, then you'll come up with the colors that you need in order to do any color study you want to do. Be sure to view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.